What's up, Buck? I am Doug with D&E in the Garage. I'm sitting in my crappy Grand Cherokee. It's almost the first of the month. That can only mean it's time for some automotive news. Now, there are two very cool stories that I'm super excited to report on in the Jeep world. But before that, we're going to do all the other news. We're going to save the best for last. First and foremost, we have to report on some good news. This is an ongoing story from past automotive news segments. The United Auto Workers strike, the GM employees who have been striking inside the United States, it looks like they'll be back to work soon. They have a tentative agreement as of today. By the time this video hits, it might actually be signed, sealed, and delivered. They just have to cross some I's and dot some T's, and they will be good to go. And it looks like they're going to get their demands. They wanted things related to healthcare and hours. It's going to cost GM, I think, $1 billion a year in operational costs, but so be it. They're going to start treating their workers a little better. Hopefully, we like to hear that. We're going to get some North American auto workers back to work. Now, this strike has actually been incredibly disruptive for GM. Aside from the operational costs going forward, they've lost a ton of costs in the inability to do repairs. Now, the auto workers who were striking were not primarily assembling new vehicles. They were building or manufacturing the parts that go into new vehicles. So GM dealerships were unable to do warranty work and other repairs. I know a few people that work at Chevy dealerships, GMC dealerships. Cars were coming in for warranty work and they just didn't have any parts for them. They couldn't do them. So GM is way backed up. They needed to get this strike resolved. Looks like they're almost there. Additionally, a nice little added nugget, if you will. The new Chevy Blazer, which is being manufactured and assembled down in Mexico, so many parts were not getting to where they needed to go because of the strike that they had to halt production on the Chevy Blazer. Now, if you know anything about the new Chevy Blazer, then you know it is a positive thing when production has been halted on that absolute abomination usurper of a classic nameplate. We want to do anything we can to hinder new Chevy Blazers getting out into the public. It's for the good of everyone. That car is an awful abomination and an affront to what the Chevy Blazer was in the past. Moving on to Ford news. Chevy getting out of hot water. Ford is in hot water. If you don't know, for 2020, for the 2020 model year released in August, they released a new Ford Explorer. It's actually pretty cool. They switched to the layout from a primarily front-wheel drive layout to a rear-wheel drive bias, which you know I love. Front-wheel drive SUVs are not okay with me. SUVs are basically trucks, and as such, they should be rear-wheel drive. So Ford went to a rear-wheel drive layout, primarily to facilitate the Explorer ST, which is just a really cool car, man. Like, Ford doesn't typically do things the way I like to see them done, but this is a really cool SUV. It's basically going to be a drift SUV, 400 horsepower. It's a wild thing. They needed the rear-wheel drive layout to do that. To accomplish the rear-wheel drive layout, they retooled their Chicago plant. Huge, major undertaking to manufacture and assemble the new 2020 Explorers. Here's the problem. They botched it. At every level, they botched it. The Explorers that are rolling off the line at the Chicago plant are so screwed up that instead of getting on a truck and going to dealerships, they're getting on a truck and going to a different plant in Michigan for repairs. They're suffering from things like loose wiring harnesses, meaning whatever the tabs are that lock the wiring harnesses in didn't get locked in. So random systems in the vehicle don't work because they're not actually, plugged in. Gear displays that don't work on the dash there. Faulty seats, which I tried to get something to expand on, and I couldn't figure out what that means. I'm not sure how a seat is faulty, but faulty seats. And improper shift covers, which again, I couldn't identify, like, are the wrong shift covers going on, or are they just not tight enough? Doesn't really matter. The new Explorers are kind of a mess, and Ford is now backpedaling hard. Obviously, whenever you release a new vehicle, you want to hit the ground running, and they hit the ground Family Guy fall style and just face planted it. But they're doing what they can to repair Explorers that have already been sold to customers, that have already hit customer driveways, and to make sure that new ones that are being sold are up to Ford Motor Company American-built standards. Now, what this means for you is that you can actually get a 2020 Explorer really inexpensively. They are throwing all kinds of discounts and rebates out there just to keep things moving. They're losing money. They're hurting. They just had to reduce their annual projection by something like $1 billion. They're not doing too well, and they're trying to backpedal and make up that lost cash by just selling more vehicles at more of a discount. So if you're willing to deal with the possibility of faulty seats, again, whatever in the world that possibly means, head on down to a Ford dealership. You might be able to get a 2020 Ford Explorer rear-wheel drive at a pretty good discount, and that's cool. You know, why not do that? Now, another company that's thrown out discounts this month is GM. Chevy in particular is offering $3,000 for Mustang owners who are willing to switch from a Mustang to a Camaro. Now, I read this story and immediately I dove in and I tried to see, like, are they doing that for Challenger owners as well? And it turns out they're not, which is odd to me. In the United States, in North America, in the world right now, there are 3 muscle cars being sold: the Challenger, the Mustang, and the Camaro. And by sales figures, I'm not going performance, preference, whatever, just by sales figures this year, in order, it goes Challenger, Mustang, and then way down at the bottom is the Camaro. So I get why Camaro is grasping at its competitors' customers, but why not go after the Challenger customers as well? Was it just for the sake of that classic Mustang-Camaro rivalry? Or I don't know what, but Challenger is outselling Mustang and Camaro by a significant margin, and I think it's going to continue to do so. The Challenger checks some boxes that the Mustang and the Camaro just don't, and furthermore, I think the Camaro is going to continue to be at the bottom of the barrel, especially with the new C8 Corvette coming out. Here's the thing: a lot of people, certainly myself, a lot of people that I talk to, they think the new Camaros are not particularly good looking. They're not particularly, it's not a particularly attractive option. You could have a Challenger, you could have a Mustang. So the only people who are likely buying Camaros right now are people who are loyal to GM. Now, you've got this crazy, insane American supercar, mid-mounted, crazy horsepower numbers, for only arguably a little bit more than a Camaro. Instead of getting a fully loaded Camaro now, you can spend a little more and get maybe a base model Corvette, which is mid-mounted. I mean, I think the Camaro in its current stage is in trouble. I think they know that. They're going to try to sell a few more. Maybe they discontinue it. I don't see them investing a lot in a next generation when they just put out the Corvette. The Corvette is the halo car. The Corvette always wins. I actually have an interesting video that I had to do a ton of research on. It's called the Killer Corvette Theory. I would urge you to go check it out. It's one of my earlier videos, so on-screen presence may not be there, but I had to do a ton of research for this, and it has like 17 views. It really bummed me out, but it's the theory that GM is willing to do anything to keep the Corvette at the top, and it's actually killed off a bunch of its own cars and damaged a bunch of its own brands just to keep the Corvette at top. I'll link it up in the corner if you're interested. Go give it a check out. Moving on was a story coming out of Europe, well, actually coming out of Japan, about Europe, that kind of bummed me out a little bit, scared me a little bit. Honda announced at the Tokyo Auto Show this year that by 2022, every single vehicle that it sells in Europe will be electric in some way. Now, that doesn't mean fully electric vehicles. It doesn't mean it's getting rid of gasoline and diesel vehicles, but it does mean that every vehicle will be at least partially electric, hybrid electric in some way by 2022, which I believe is the most aggressive date any manufacturer or government has set out for that full changeover. Now, of course, this scares me because I don't know how a guy like me fits into a world where every single vehicle is electric in some way. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean they're going to do away with non-electric vehicles if you already own them, and it certainly doesn't mean that North America is on this timeline. North America has spoken. We're going to get to this later. We're not ready to fully commit to electric vehicles. We don't really care, but it just is another step on that road towards a world that I personally know I wouldn't recognize or fit into very well. And my question, and everyone's question, is obviously at some point we do away with the archaic and awful Greta disapproved internal combustion engine, and the question is, does it happen in my lifetime? Does it happen in my daughter's lifetime? Does it happen in her children's lifetime? What is the overall timeline? Some people would like to see us do away with these awful polluting vehicles by something like 2030, 2050, 2300, I don't know, but whenever that happens, I hope I'm long gone. And it further underlines that I could never move to Europe. I just would not fit in Europe at all. Another interesting electric car story, and it's something I kind of had to piece together, and it's a bullet that was dodged, but it does highlight what I think is an issue. So, and again, I'm sorry that in every one of these I get at California in some reason. You guys, your government just makes you an easy target. I do thoroughly apologize. I don't don't hate you, I do hate your government. California is currently being ravaged by wildfires, if you don't know. If you guys are out there, I absolutely feel for you. I'd love to hear down in the squawk boxes your experience with these wildfires. One of the things they're doing, one of the many things they're doing to try to mitigate the threat of wildfires is they're going with controlled blackouts, meaning they're shutting off power to large areas of the state all at once. I guess they've identified that downed wires or loose electricity is either exacerbating or outright causing these wildfires. So to prevent that, large areas are just getting completely shut down. That's a huge bummer. I can't even imagine getting a letter in the mail that says for X number of days you're just not going to have power and there's nothing you can do about it. But the bigger issue here is that what does California push on its drivers in a big way? They incentivize it. They made it obvious they want to convert to this. Electric cars. California has more electric cars than any other state in the Union in North America. And so it's actually a pretty big problem. People are getting letters in the mail. Tesla owners are getting letters in the mail. Hey, so you're just not gonna have power for the next X number of days. And they're like, okay, not okay. So it doesn't seem like any power was out long enough where people were just dying on the side of the road. But the bigger issue that it did cause was people were panicking, so they're rushing to the nearest Tesla supercharge station, and the lines were just astronomical. You see these pictures of lines 20, 30 cars deep of people waiting to charge their vehicle all the way to the top before the power goes down so that they can make it around for the couple of days, whatever the power was going to be out. Now this is crisis averted in this situation. I couldn't find a single instance of somebody just dying on the highway. They're stranded in the middle of nowhere because they couldn't get their car charged. But it does suggest we're not there yet, man. We can pretend like electric cars are here and the time is now, but the reality is that the infrastructure is not there, and the infrastructure is fragile. Now, if something like that happened out where I live, it'd be catastrophic. There's no supercharging stations out here. Going through a tunnel. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Oh, there's no supercharging stations out here. If I owned a Tesla, I'd have to have this set up in my garage, and if my power went out, I'd be left with the power that I had. Now, these controlled blackouts were limited. Out where Eric and I live, Hurricane Sandy happened a number of years ago. I didn't have power for 2 weeks. Nobody in my area had power for 2 weeks. Every morning, it was actually kind of cool because we didn't have, work was closed, everything was closed. So Eric and I, every morning we'd get up, we'd get in his S10 pickup truck, we'd drive deep into Pennsylvania where they did have power. We'd wait in line for God knows how long at the gas station, fill up as many red containers as we could, come back, and we would pass out gasoline to all our friends and family in an area where we live to keep all the generators going, because it was also bitterly cold. It was a pretty heckish time, but it was a fun time if you're a survivalist. You really got to test your skills. Now, you can't fill up a red container full of electricity. So if I'd owned a Tesla during Hurricane Sandy or any electronic vehicle, I would have been totally screwed. And people ask me all the time, why are you such a dick about electric cars? You know what I mean? Like, do you just hate on them for the sake of hating on them? No, I hate on them because I think it's impractical, and I don't think we're there yet. And I think people are shoving this down our throat as a nearsighted solution for what is arguably, yes, a gigantic problem, but it's a very nearsighted solution, just shoving electric cars down our throat. The infrastructure's not there yet. We've illustrated this in California. Excuse me, I have a cold right now. And crisis averted because the power outages were not that long, and Tesla stepped in and was able to mitigate some factors, but scary moment for some electric car owners out there. And that's all I have to say about that. Last story about electric vehicles, then I'll move on. It's just a quick one. Honda came out with its new plug-in electric vehicle. It's actually kind of a cool looking vehicle. Usually I don't like the aesthetic they give electric vehicles, but the Honda e-car, known as the Jazz in some markets, is pretty interesting. It was originally going to come to the United States, North America. Now it's not. They focus grouped it, and it turned out that North Americans aren't going to buy it. In fact, North Americans really don't want electric cars at all. There's a very small demographic of North Americans who can afford the lifestyle that goes around with an electric car, and the rest of us said nope, we don't want it. We want an internal combustion engine, and that is reflected now. Very popular over in Europe, where commutes are much shorter, city streets are much smaller, terrain is much more traversable. But here in the United States, in Canada, we're not having it. We still need our four-wheel drive, big, heavy-duty, solid, built-up vehicles with internal combustion engines, and I think that's just fine. Now, on to something that makes us sad at D&E. And it's something that's been happening for the last few years, and the final word on it is in. It's done. The Subaru EJ engine, the very, very, very last iteration of that engine, has been released at the Tokyo Auto Show this week. It is going to be in what's called the Final Edition STI. For those that don't know, if you have any positive impression of Subaru, it's because of the EJ motor, I assure you. It was released in 1989 for the Japanese domestic market legacy. It's the block that went in all of their vehicles up until 2011, I think, 2010, when they started phasing it out for the FB motors. In the United States, we got the EJ25. That's going to be all of your Foresters, your STIs. It's all some version of the EJ block. But the EJ block is what made Subaru what Subaru is today. The EJ block is to Subaru what the 4-liter is to Jeep, 100%. Now, I'm not a Subaru fanboy, but I do love Subarus. When somebody asks me what kind of car they should get their daughter who just started driving, I do not tell them a Jeep Grand Cherokee. I tell them a Subaru Forester. Early model, Subaru Forester, EJ25 motor. I had a 1998. That was when the EJ was still single overhead cam. I loved that motor, man. It was flawless. 250,000 miles, ticked like a New York cab, leaked as though it just had holes drilled right in the block, but you top her off, put the key in, and go for it. Now, here's the thing. That motor is 30 years old now. It makes sense that it's going away, but it is a huge bummer. The fact that Subaru got 30 years out of it and was able to still pull respectable emissions numbers, to still pull respectable MPG numbers out of it, is incredible. It was an incredible motor. I think they will be around for years and years and years. People are going to continue to seek them out. Eric is one of them. Eric is absolutely a Subaru fanboy. He's forgotten more about Subaru than I'll ever know, and he was truly devastated to see the EJ block go away. He has one of the new FBs in his newer Outback. I think he is begrudgingly coming around on it. He said that it's a totally different feel. You know, if you've ever driven a Subaru, that they have a very specific feel to driving them, and it's kind of a weird ride, and it's interesting, and it doesn't even take long to get used to. It's just different, and you immediately like it. And a lot of that is the EJ block, and a lot of that's gone away. The new FBs smooth out some of the rough edges, but officially gone after this. So let's all take a moment of silence for the EJ motor real quick. All right, finally, the two awesome stories for Jeep for this month's automotive news. AM General is trying to get a hold of some Gladiators to create what they're calling the XMT, the Extreme Military Truck. Now, AM General was previously owned by AMC. They were the government contracts arm of AMC when AMC owned Jeep, when AMC was producing M131A1s for the US military, essentially CJ5s for the military. When AMC went under, GM purchased AM General, at that point building Hummers for the military. AM General is trying to get back into the US military, and they want to use the Gladiator to do it. And I love that idea. I think that is awesome. I want to see the Jeep, I want to see American GIs riding around in the Jeep again, more than anything. Their plan, or they believe that the Gladiator is the perfect platform. It's full frame, it's got the truck bed, it's still got seating for 4 or 5, so they want to outfit it for all types of various mission specific and general purpose needs that the US military currently has. Now, this is not the only version of a Wrangler being used by militaries right now. I've talked about the J8 a number of times. The J8 is the coolest JKU you will ever see. If you don't know, you need to know. Its front is modified so that it's front and rear leaf sprung. It's beefed to all get out. There's even a scrambler version of it. It's awesome. Now, the US military did not purchase any of these, at least not yet, not to my knowledge. The Egyptian army uses them. A bunch of mining companies use them, believe it or not, but they are absolutely beastly. Apparently, the Gladiator has been selected by AM General to try to put together this concept that they believe the US government will want. I think that's awesome. Now on to number 2. This is the one that's actually going to affect you, me, and the Uncle Jerry's out there in the world. We believe we've spotted the first iteration of the new Wagoneer that's been teased and promised and suggested for so long. And the awesome part, it looks like it's on the frame from a Ram 1500. This is truly amazing news because it's been up in the air. Was it going to be on the Giulia platform like the new Grand Cherokee is supposedly going to be? Was it going to be on some other Durango platform? Was it going to be unibody? Was it not going to be unibody? It looks like they are keeping the Wagoneer true to form. They're going to make it body on frame on a legit truck frame, which is awesome, which means we're going to get all the excellent motors. You're going to get the 5.7. You're going to have the diesel options, potentially an SRT option, and you're going to get a true full frame 3-row Jeep SUV that can tow, that can haul, that can move the family, that has some real serious capability, and I just couldn't be happier. Way too often these days, we bring back old nameplates and we butcher it. See the Blazer. They had an opportunity to do something awesome with an old nameplate and they just squandered the opportunity. They just took the nameplate and ran with it for no reason. It does not so far appear like Jeep is going to do that. The Wagoneer is going to be everything we could have hoped for. Can you imagine a Jeep Wagoneer on a 1500 frame? Oh man, that thing would be so cool. Now we're legitimately competing with Expeditions and Suburbans, and I just couldn't be happier. And that is your D&E automotive news for the month of November, going into the month of November 2019. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did like the video, by all means like the video, sub to the channel. Please consider checking us out on Patreon, Etsy, and Teespring. Leave us a comment down there in the squawk boxes. If you have any experience with the UAW strike, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any experience with the wildfires and the outages out in California, I'd love to hear from you. If you have any experience with the 2020 Explorer, or have seen any of these issues, or know what the heck a faulty seat is, I'd love to hear from you. Let's all, if you've ever had a positive or negative, whatever, experience with an EJ block, go ahead and leave us a story down there in the squawk boxes. Again, not a 4-cylinder guy at all, not a Subaru fanboy, but I love the EJ block, man. It's just a great motor. It is the equivalent of the 4-liter in a 4-cylinder form. Horizontally opposed boxer motor. Just a great motor, man. It's gonna, I mean, and Subaru's keeping the boxer out layout. It's just a different block, you know. So that's all there is to it. If you got any comments on anything else, I'd love to hear from you. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.